First of all, the transition deal that Theresa May is hoping is going to be signed off. Is it a sellout to you and other Leave voters?
It's a compromise. I particularly regret that it's postponing the day when we take back control over our fisheries and our waters again. But the important question is what happens at the end of that implementation period. If we get the right new relationship with Europe, then that is the key issue for me. I can accept compromise in relation to the implementation period if the end result is proper respect for the referendum once we finish the implementation period.
Right, so it was worth the sacrifice for a greater or bigger prize. But do you think the government should have given way in the way they did over taking back something as fundamental as fishing rights and waters?
It was a difficult situation for them. I mean, I know from my conversations with businesses that they definitely wanted an implementation period. And I've actually argued for that from a relatively early stage. So I recognise if we were going to secure agreement on that, inevitably that did mean some compromises. And unfortunately, one of those appears to have been in relation to the fishing sector.
What about another one? The fact that EU citizens arriving during transition will have exactly the same rights as those who arrived before. Are you happy with that?
I can live with that. I mean, obviously this was an area where the Prime Minister had, said that she wasn't going to allow that to happen. But if we are maintaining an implementation period where we get more or less the same rights as an existing member state, inevitably that means that we do probably take on almost all of the obligations as well. It's not a situation that I would have wanted in an ideal world. I would have wanted the benefits of leaving the EU to be gained at an earlier stage. But as long as we get them after December 2020, that is the important thing. That's the prize that we're seeking.
And can you live with the fact that Britain will have to abide by new laws introduced by the EU during transition without having a seat at the table?
Well, that is one of the most difficult points. I think there is, there obviously are attempts in the agreement that's been made for a joint committee to ensure that the two sides act fairly in relation to this implementation period, and that includes obviously a dialogue in relation to new laws being introduced. But that, for me, yes, is another compromise with which I am uncomfortable.
Right. I mean, you've compromised a lot, it seems, like the government. You agree with the government's compromise. I mean, in what way does the transition deal fulfil the Leavers' vision, your vision, of a sovereign country freed from the constraints imposed by European politicians, laws and regulations?
It won't deliver that until after the end of the implementation period, I'm afraid.
Right, so we're leaving at the end of March 2019, but actually we will have left the EU in name only. That's correct, isn't it?
You could describe it like that. I'm not sure I would use exactly those words, but we have to make compromises if we're going to make a success of Brexit. And we also need to recognise that the country remains divided about this. So being able to listen to the concerns, different views, I think is very important if we're going to bridge the divisions that emerge.
Right. I mean, listening to Theresa Villiers, is it sensible to be pragmatic, to compromise, because actually the bigger prize is the free trade deal, or rather the trade deal and relationship we have with the EU after Brexit?
Well, I think Theresa and people who share her view can be rather cool about it right now, because actually what we're seeing is a lot of theatre. It's worth saying, by the way, that I spend the rest of my time on the continent, and Brexit isn't a big deal elsewhere. For them, this is a kind of, it's a bit of shadow boxing. What will happen, and I think Theresa's right about this, what matters is what happens at the end. And we're not really anywhere near getting on to the question of migration, how you deal with services, the trade issues. A lot of that will happen during the transition stroke implementation period. So my feeling is that we can get ourselves all worked up about it, but the truth of the matter is lots of it isn't really... battle hasn't been joined on some of the key things yet.
Right, do you accept that?
I think that's a reasonable analysis. The big battle is yet to come. What happens when we leave in name as well as in fact at the end of 2020?
Right, so what, this is the phony war so far?
It's an important negotiation, but it doesn't address the very big question, which is what is the nature of our future relationship with the European Union?
Well, let's talk about something symbolic, which are these passports. Do you welcome the decision to award this contract for the new British blue passport to a Franco-Dutch company?
Well, we don't know that that's the final decision yet.
Oh.
But because from what I understand, from what you and others have said, the procurement process isn't completed.
Right, but if it is and it goes to the Franco-Dutch company, as it looks at the moment, would you welcome it?
We have to take into account the interests of taxpayers in getting value for money for public spending. And so on the whole, whilst I think we definitely need reform of our public procurement rules to make them much simpler, the principle that the government and public authorities looks to different bids, including bids from different countries, is one that I can support. It brings overall economic benefits. I wish in this case that perhaps the passports could have been produced in the United Kingdom.
But I mean, isn't that what it's all about, though, Theresa Villiers? I mean, wasn't that the whole point of the Leave vision, or certainly part of it? I mean, Theresa May said delivering the best Brexit is about our national future, part of the way we improve the lives of people all over the country. Our best days lies ahead. And yet, there we go, handing the contract to a Franco-Dutch company, countries in the EU that we are leaving. What does that say?
Leaving the European Union is not about pulling up the drawbridge and not doing business with other countries. We have a very open economy, including the way our public procurement works, and we gain significant economic benefits as a result, including the fact that companies here can make passports for governments across the world.
Oh, we look forward to that announcement.
Yeah, but this is part of the Leaver case that you guys didn't really say anything very much about. We can go out and compete in the world, but we're going to lose some of the time. And this is a case of losing. Delarue operate in many countries. I think they claim 40 countries. And I don't hear them going on about local preference when they make banknotes for Haiti or passports for somewhere else. Or, by the way, the $50 banknote for the country my family comes from, Guyana. I didn't hear them saying there should be a local Guyanese firm who do this. So I think, actually, they should stop whining. And if there's a future we should go into, I think, actually, Theresa, you should say, this is the way things are, and what we should really be doing is gearing up to compete more successfully rather than complaining when we come second.
Oh, you are absolutely right. This is all about being competitive and making sure that our businesses are producing absolutely the best bids, not only for UK public procurement, but for public procurement across the world.
Theresa, thank you for coming in.